after his arrest. The mobs of African Americans and whites marched to the courthouse where Roland was held. Shots were fired, and the riot has officially begun. Black Tulsans fought hard to protect their houses and businesses, but were outnumbered. For the next 2 days, African American businesses of Greenwood suffered a rash of arson attacks and lootings. Many residents were arrested and placed into holding centers. Now I will be talking about the aftermath of the Tulsa race massacres of 1921. The massacre killed hundreds of residents and burned more than 1,250 homes and erased years of Black success. One factor that drove the violence was the resentment towards the Black success that was being seen within the block of Greenwood. So a group of white men came in and destroyed this whole neighborhood, all because of their jealousy of the success they have been achieving within this neighborhood. The financial toll of the massacre is evident in the 1.8 million in property loss claims, which equals to 27 million in today's dollars. In an article in the New York Times called "What the Tulsa Massacre Destroyed," they had quickly summarized the true loss that the Tulsa Massacre caused. And they had this to say: the destruction of property is only one piece of the financial devastation that the massacre brought. Much bigger is a sobering kind of inheritance, the incalculated and enduring loss of what could have been and the generational wealth that might have shaped and secured the fortune of Black children and grandchildren. So they did not just simply lose their homes or their lives, they lost their future. They lost the opportunity to succeed in America. And if that massacre wouldn't have happened, the world would look so much different now than what we see today.
And now we'll be talking about broader historical themes. The Tulsa Race Massacre, as can be gathered from the name, connects to the historical theme of racism in the United States. Even before the nation became independent, the roots of racism had grown, which can be seen when the then British colonies started extorting and importing slaves from Africa in 1618. This helped establish a false idea that Black people were less than the white colonists. These roots continued, even staying until the 1920s, where racism was prevalent. This racism could be seen in many ways, one of which being the Jim Crow laws, which restricted the rights of many Black people. And especially in the South, lynches were very common, especially in Oklahoma. By 1921, at least 31 people had been lynched in the newly formed state. And Oklahoma was a state since 1907. 26 of these people were Black. This shows that Rowland was right to be in fear. He had been proven innocent of the crime that he had supposedly committed, but even then, the white people didn't know this, and even if they were told that, they would still attempt to lynch him. And so he was in fear. Because of this, the word spread out, and other Black people were able to hear and came to defend Rowland. A total of 75 Black men came, according to an estimate, and some of them were armed. There was also a big group of white people, around 1,000, and when they saw the Black armed people, they perceived them as a threat, so they went themselves to go get armed. It can be seen that they perceived them as a threat because historically, Black people were, unfortunately, deemed to be, more savage due to the racism that was prevalent across the country. They also asked the police to disarm the Black men and to make them go away. The police weren't able to disarm them, but they did successfully make them go away. And as the black men were leaving, a white man tried to disarm them, still perceiving them as a threat. And because of this, the black man shot the white man in self-defense. Chaos then ensued after this. This whole event happened because of racism. When people were in fear, rumors were spread confirming the fear, and then everything else happened. And even afterwards, racism can be seen across the Oklahoma. Because at the end of 1921, 3,200 of Tulsa's 72,000 residents were Ku Klux Klan members, a very bad group. And this estimate is given by Charles Alexander, a professor of history at Ohio University. Thank you, and now we'll be moving on to the next section.
So now I'm going to be talking about the economic significance of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Um, Black people have been prevented from having a stable place in society basically since slavery ended. They're often relegated to like a second class status through various forms of oppression. And the Tulsa Race Massacre was among the most violent. After the riots ended, a lot of people were left with little to nothing to salvage from the rebel. And generational wealth is a huge part of like social mobility. And the residents of Tulsa, Oklahoma literally had theirs burned to the ground. Greenwood residents filed claims for $1.8 million, although a 2018 study claims there's an estimated loss of approximately 1,200 medium-sized homes with a modern value of over $150 million. Along with the loss of assets like cash and valuable objects, the estimated loss goes way over $200 million. And also, that doesn't consider things like investments that could have been made or that property being sold. So there's honestly a lot more than 200 million that was lost. It's also the potential that they could have made with that. Um, and with rent prices going up, a lot of people have had to leave Tulsa or they've become homeless. There's a huge racial gap in Tulsa now because uh, the riots just led to this huge disparity. A lot of Black people have become homeless or had to leave Tulsa. It's really sad. Um, and that 200 million plus would have caused Tulsa to be one of the wealthiest Black communities today. Ironically, the wealthiest people in Tulsa are two white people that are on the Forbes list. It kind of goes back to that racial gap. Um, until this data sort of closes, until the racial gap closes, there's really not enough going on. The Tulsa Race Massacre was a cruel and heinous act filled by hatred, and its effects were devastating. The racial gap caused by the riot displaced many people and caused misery and suffering. It's important to remember and reflect on times like this because this community is one of many that have suffered similar fates throughout history. We need to prevent things like this from happening in the future and also find ways to help these communities heal. It's really important to be having these conversations because we bring up all of these marginalized communities and these wrong communities, but we don't really bring up how to fix this. I think reparation are a big part of it, and also like preventing and learning from these tragedies. The flourishing businesses that were lost could have caused Tulsa to be one of the wealthiest Black communities today. Even though there seems to be some form of recognition for the great loss, until the data shows that the racial gap has closed, it's not enough.